Ideo. Alrighty. Picking up where we left off yesterday. And it's going to be a short stream. President Trump had his day in court. We've proven the election was stolen, but no judge, including the Supreme Court of the United States, has had the courage to allow it to be heard. That was how President Trump described efforts to overturn the election in court one day before the Electoral College met on December 14th, 2020. December 14th. Judges across the nation did evaluate President Trump's claims that the election was stolen. As longtime Republican election attorney Benjamin Ginsburg testified before the Select Committee. Benjamin, do we have Ginsburg in our list? Yes. As longtime Republican election attorney Benjamin Ginsburg testified before the Select Committee, the president's camp did have their day in court. It's just that in no instance did a court find that the charges of fraud were real. In total, the Trump campaign and allies of President Trump filed 62 separate lawsuits between November 4th and January 6th, calling into question or seeking to overturn the election results. Out of 62 cases, only one case resulted in a victory for the president or his allies, which affected relatively few votes, did not vindicate any underlying claims of fraud, and would not have changed the outcome in Pennsylvania. 30 of these cases were dismissed by a judge after a hearing on the merits. In every state in which claims were brought, one or more judges specifically explained as a part of their dismissal orders that they had evaluated the plaintiff's allegations or supposed proof of widespread election fraud or other irregularities and found the claims to be entirely unconvincing. Uh, oh, here we go. "62 cases. 9 states and D.C. are the sites of case filings. In 9 states. 61 losses, 1 win. 22 judges appointed by Republican presidents oversaw cases. Wow. All 3 of Trump's appointed Supreme Court justices rejected the fraud claims. That's pretty hefty. So 10 Trump appointed judges, 3 Supreme Court Trump appointed justices, 22 Republican appointed judges, all were part of these cases. In Arizona, for example, the plaintiffs in Bowyer versus Ducey alleged that the election was tainted by the introduction of hundreds of thousands of illegal, ineligible, duplicate, or purely fictional ballots. A federal judge dismissed their suit, finding it void of plausible allegations and sorely wanting of relevant or reliable evidence. Likewise, in Ward versus Jackson, an Arizona state court judge dismissed a lawsuit by the state GOP chair following a 2-day trial, finding no evidence of misconduct, fraud, or illegal votes. This ruling was unanimously upheld by the state Supreme Court, where all 7 justices were appointed by GOP governors. Bowyer v. Ducey. Ward. Jackson. Boland versus Raffensperger. Wood versus Raffensperger. In Ward versus Jackson, an Arizona State court judge dismissed the lawsuit and the ruling was upheld by the state Supreme Court, which had all 7 GOP appointed, justices appointed by GOP state governors. So his own team, the Republicans. In Georgia, a state court dismissed Boland versus Raffensperger, which alleged that tens of thousands of illegal ballots were cast by out-of-state voters or with invalid signature matches. The judge found that the complaint's factual allegations rest on speculation rather than duly pled facts and do not support a conclusion that sufficient illegal votes were cast to change or place in doubt the results of the election. The judge in Boland versus Raffensperger was appointed by a GOP governor, and seven out of 8 state Supreme Court justices along with 7 out of the 8 Supreme Court justices who upheld her ruling. In Wood versus Raffensperger, federal judge denied relief to the plaintiff, alleged that the complaint was that new procedures for checking absentee signatures spoiled the results by making it harder to reject illegal ballots. The judge found no basis in fact or law to grant him the relief he seeks. The judge wrote that this argument is belied by the record because absentee ballots were actually rejected for signature issues at the same rate as in 2018. In Michigan, okay, so this is just a bunch of cases. We've only got a few more. All right. Yes. Yeah, but like, go to a new tab. Um, Complaint. Massive election fraud. Ruling. Okay, the claim, not complaint. Ruling. The claim is based on nothing but speculation and conjecture that votes for Trump were destroyed discarded, or switched to votes for Biden. Similarly, a state court judge rejected plaintiffs' claims in 2 cases brought against Detroit and the surrounding county that accused them of systematic fraud in how absentee ballots were counted. The judge found that one group of plaintiffs offered no evidence to support their assertions, and that the other group's interpretation of events is incorrect and decidedly contradicted by highly respected election experts. In Nevada, a state court judge rejected a litany of claims of systematic election fraud in Law v. Whitmer, ruling that plaintiffs did not prove under any standard of proof that illegal votes were cast and counted, or legal votes were not counted at all due to voter fraud, or for any other improper or illegal reason. The ruling was unanimously upheld by the Nevada Supreme Court. In Pennsylvania, Donald Trump for president versus Bukvar. A federal judge dismissed Donald Trump for president versus Bukvar, finding that the Trump campaign had presented nothing but strained legal arguments without merit and speculative accusations unpled in the operative complaint and unsupported by evidence. The dismissal was upheld by the United States Court of Appeals for the Third Circuit, which held calling an election unfair does not make it so. Charges require specific allegations and then proof. We have neither here. That opinion was authored by another Trump appointee. In Wisconsin, lastly, Another judge dismissed a lawsuit accusing the Wisconsin Elections Commission of constitutional violations that likely tainted more than 50,000 ballots. The judge ruled, "This court has allowed plaintiff the chance to make his case, and he has lost on the merits, failing to show that the outcome was affected by commission rules about drop boxes, ballot addresses, or individuals who claimed indefinitely confined status to vote from home." The ruling was upheld by a 3-judge panel of the United States Court of Appeals for the Seventh Circuit, all of whom were Republican appointees, including one appointed by President Trump himself. Wisconsin case. In all, the judges who heard these post-election cases included 22 federal judges appointed by Republican presidents. President Trump and his lawyers were well aware that courts were consistently rejecting his claims. During a December 18th meeting in the Oval Office with President Trump, Sidney Powell and others, White House senior advisor Eric Hirschman, pointed out that President Trump's lawyers had their opportunity to prove their case in court and failed. Powell fired back that the judges are corrupt. Hirschman responded, every single case that you've done in the country you guys lost, every one of them is corrupt, even the ones we appointed. President Trump was faced with another choice after having his day in court. He could accept that there was no real evidence of voter fraud, or he could continue to amplify conspiracy theories and lies. He chose the latter. Be right back. Okay, we're back. Fucking where was I? Yeah. December 18th. Meeting in the Oval Office. Trump, Sidney Powell, and others. Eric Hirschman? Hirschman. President Trump was faced. Oh, yes. President Trump repeatedly promoted conspiracy theories. Instead of accepting his defeat, President Trump attempted to justify his big lie with a series of increasingly preposterous claims. The president was not simply led astray by those around him. The opposite was true. He actively promoted conspiracy theories and false election fraud claims even after being informed that they were baseless by everyone around him. His opponents, his supporters, his lawyers, his campaign, everyone except the bootlickers that he installed because they refused to agree with him. Millions of President Trump's supporters believed the election was stolen from him. Many of them still do, but President Trump knew the truth and chose to lie about it. The power of the president's bully pulpit should not be underestimated, specifically in the digital age. President Trump's relentless lying sowed seeds of distrust in America's election system. Researchers who studied this election denial phenomenon have noted President Trump didn't just prime his audience to be receptive to false narratives of election fraud. He inspired them to produce those narratives and then echoed those false claims back to them. That is real important. Because that's exactly what happened. It was a feedback loop. Trump said all those things. His followers believed it. They concocted new ones, said it back to him, and then he took those and ran with it, and it kept feeding back into itself. We watched that play out live. Social media played a prominent role in amplifying erroneous claims of election fraud. Shortly after Election Day, the Stop the Steal campaign, discussed more fully in Chapter 6, went viral. Stop the Steal influencers echoed President Trump's premature declaration of victory, asserting that he won the election, the Democrats stole it from him, and it was the responsibility of American patriots to combat this supposed injustice. This resulted in what Attorney General Barr has described as an avalanche of false claims, as President Trump's supporters attempted to justify his big lie. The post-election allegations of fraud or other malfeasance were completely bogus, silly, and usually based on complete misinformation, Barr explained. Nonetheless, many of President Trump's supporters wanted to believe them. The stolen election narrative has proven to be remarkably durable precisely because it is a matter of belief, not evidence or reason. Each time a claim was debunked, more claims emerged in its place. Barr later complained that this dynamic forced him and the others to play whack-a-mole. The United States Department of Justice, under Barr's leadership and then Acting Attorney General Jeffrey Rosen, was forced to knock down one lie after another. As discussed in Chapter 4, Barr took unprecedented steps to investigate the avalanche of lies. Claims of election fraud were referred to United States attorneys' offices and the FBI for investigation. Deputy Attorney General Richard Donoghue Richard Dono. Gahue. Deputy Attorney General. Tracked dozens of investigations. None of them were found to have merit. The top officials in President Trump's Justice Department personally told the president that the claims he was promoting were false, but that did not matter to the president. As Barr told the Select Committee, President Trump never showed any indication of interest in what the actual facts were. For example, on December 27th, Rosen and Donahue spent approximately 2 hours on the phone with President Trump. They debunked a litany of claims regarding the election, explaining that each had been investigated and found to be baseless. According to Donahue, President Trump had his arsenal of allegations that he wanted to rely on. Donahue thought it was necessary to explain to the president, based on actual investigations, actual witness interviews, actual reviews of documents, that these allegations simply had no merit. Donahue wanted to cut through the noise and be very blunt with the president, making it clear that these allegations were simply not true. During their December 27th conversation, Rosen and Donahue rebutted false claims regarding... Hold on, do we have Rosen? We don't. During the December 27th conversation, Rosen and Donahue spent approximately 2 hours on the phone with President Trump. They rebutted false claims regarding suitcases of ballots in Georgia, Dominion's voting machines in Antrim County, a truckload of ballots in Pennsylvania, ballots being scanned multiple times, people voting more than once, dead people voting, Native Americans being paid to vote, and more votes than voters in particular jurisdictions. As the officials debunked each claim, President Trump would just roll on to another one. Donahue told President Trump he gish-galloped his own advisors. Donahue told President Trump that federal law enforcement officials had conducted dozens of investigations and hundreds of interviews, and they had concluded that the major allegations were not supported by the evidence developed. Donahue and Rosen told President Trump flat out that much of the information he was getting was false and or just not supported by the evidence. President Trump responded, "You guys may not be following the internet the way I do." Yay. The Department of Justice was not alone in trying to contain the president's conspiracy mongering. President Trump's lies were often debunked in real time by state authorities, judges, experts, journalists, federal officials, and even members of his own legal team. As discussed above, the president's campaign team found that there was no significant fraud in the election, so the president pushed them aside. The courts rejected nearly every claim brought by the president's legal team. Even though courts rejected the claims as speculative, unsupported, and meritless, President Trump, Rudy Giuliani, and others continued to assert them as truth to Trump's followers in speeches, tweets, and podcasts. The burden of refuting these false claims made by President Trump and his surrogates often fell on state and local officials. For example, in Michigan, the Secretary of State's office posted thorough and prompt responses to the claims of election fraud on a fact-check page on its website. In Georgia, the Secretary of State's office issued news releases and held frequent press conferences in the weeks following the election to respond to claims of election fraud. County clerks in the contested states also spoke out publicly to refute allegations, even as the president undermined the public's confidence in how votes are cast and counted. These clerks assured voters that their elections were secure and they could have confidence in the results. Outside experts also publicly denounced and dismantled the claims being raised and amplified by President Trump. This was done in the context of litigation, congressional hearings, and press releases. President Trump simply ignored these authoritative sources and continued to promote false claims that had been soundly discredited. Below, the Select Committee presents 2 case studies demonstrating how President Trump and his surrogates lied in the face of overwhelming evidence. The first case study deals with Dominion voting systems. President Trump repeatedly claimed that Dominion software switched votes and rigged the election well after the leaders of campaign and Justice Department officials told him that these claims were baseless. The president's smear of Dominion was central to his big lie. The second case study examines video footage recorded in Fulton County on election night. President Trump and his representatives concocted a fictional narrative based on a deceptively edited version of the footage. After these 2 case studies, the Select Committee examines a variety of other claims the president repeatedly made. Once again, these claims had no basis in truth. Dominion voting systems. Between Election Day and January 6th, President Trump repeatedly spread conspiracy theories about Dominion voting systems. The president tweeted or retweeted false claims about Dominion more than 30 times. He also repeatedly lied about the company's software during his post-election speeches and interviews. President Trump's own campaign staff, administration officials, and state officials all told him the claims had no merit. Hand recounts confirmed the fidelity of the machines, but none of this overwhelming evidence mattered. President Trump demonstrated a conscious disregard for the facts and continued to maliciously smear Dominion. President Trump's allies began spreading false claims regarding Dominion within days of the election. On November 8th, the day after the networks called the election for Joe Biden, Sidney Powell claimed on Fox News that Dominion machines were flipping votes in the computer system or adding votes that did not exist. On November 8th. Yes, okay, good. November 12th, Rudy Giuliani appeared on Fox News to claim that Dominion was connected to Venezuelan dictator Hugo Chavez and its software was created in order to fix elections. The same day, President Trump retweeted a report claiming that Dominion had deleted 2.7 million Trump votes nationwide and switched hundreds of thousands of votes in key swing states. By that time, the Trump campaign team had looked into allegations regarding Dominion and its software and concluded that the claims were false. An internal campaign memo dated November 12th said that Dominion software did not lead to improper vote counts and cited reports concluding that, among other things, Dominion machines did not affect the final vote count. The memo also addressed various claims of foreign influence regarding Dominion. Jason Miller told the select committee. Jason Miller, who's that? Campaign advisor. Jason Miller told the select committee that by November 12th, he had told President Trump the results of the analysis of the Dominion claims by the campaign's internal research team, specifically telling him that the international allegations for Dominion were not valid. Emails and text messages show that this same analysis was shared with Mark Meadows, President Trump's chief of staff. White House Press Secretary Kayleigh McEnany told the Select Committee that she found herself waving President Trump off of the Dominion theory, encouraging him to use more fact-driven arguments, but it was to no avail. White House Press Secretary. Even though members of the Trump campaign team reported that the result of the election was not compromised by any problems with Dominion machines, the president continued to assail Dominion on Twitter in the days that followed. For example, retweeting a false claim that Dominion's machines were engineered by China, Venezuela, and Cuba, and claiming that Dominion had rigged the election. Officials in the Trump administration also worked to debunk the false rumors about vote manipulation. The United States Department of Homeland Security's Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, CISA, released a joint statement of election security officials on November 12th, reassuring voters that the election was the most secure in America's history. CISA emphasized, there is no evidence that any voting system deleted or lost votes, changed votes, or was in any way compromised. This was another decision point for the president. He could choose to endorse the findings of of his administration's own cybersecurity experts, or he could continue to promote baseless fictions about Dominion. President Trump chose the lies. The president and his supporters never did produce any evidence showing that Dominion's machines affected the results of the election. But President Trump was undeterred by the facts. Indeed, the president and his supporters seized upon a simple human error in a small Michigan county as their initial pretense for these allegations, as well as to keep the Dominion conspiracy theory alive. During the early morning hours of November 4th, Cheryl Guy, a clerk in Antrim County, Michigan, reported the unofficial results of the vote count. Simple human error, November 4th. Guy's online report was odd. It showed that former Vice President Biden had somehow won Antrim, a county that is majority Republican, and President Trump was expected to easily win. Trump's supporters quickly pointed to Biden's improbable win as evidence that Dominion had tampered with the votes. This wasn't true. Guy had made a mistake in updating the election counting software after a late addition to a local candidate to the ballot in some of the country's precincts, which caused her unofficial counts to be off when she tallied the votes reported by the various precincts. Guy, a Republican, was informed of the odd result and began to investigate immediately. The result was corrected, and President Trump won Antrim just as expected. Within days, local and state officials in Michigan explained to the public what had happened. On November 7th, the Michigan Secretary of State's office issued a detailed description of Guy's error and assured the public that the official results were not impacted. The Michigan Senate's Committee on Oversight, led by Republican Senator Ed McBroom, we got to add names. Cheryl Guy. And Ed McBroom. On November 7th, the Michigan Secretary of State's office issued a detailed description of Guy's error and assured the public that the official results were not impacted. The Michigan Senate's Committee on Oversight, led by Senator Ed McBroom, conducted its own comprehensive review of the claims related to Antrim County and confirmed that the initial reporting error was entirely attributable to an honest mistake by the county clerk. The mix-up in Antrim County was quickly corrected. A human erred, not the voting machines. But President Trump used it as a pretext to continue lying about Dominion. On November 12th, the same day CISA released its statement on election security, President Trump asked Tim Walberg, Republican congressman from Michigan. To check with key leadership in Michigan's legislature as to how supportive they could be in regards to pushing back on election irregularities and potential fraud. That night, President Trump asked his acting Secretary of Homeland Security, Chad Wolf. Jesus. To look into allegations of election irregularities in Michigan. The next day, President Trump's assistant sent Wolf a letter from Michigan state legislatures raising claims about the election, including an incorrect claim that flawed Dominion software had caused votes to be counted for the wrong candidate. Administration officials quickly knocked down the Dominion claim. Wolf forwarded the allegations to the leadership of CISA, including CISA Director Christopher Krebs. Krebs provided Wolf with a press release from the Michigan Secretary of State that debunked the false claims about Antrim County and Dominion's software in detail. Wolf shared an update about the information he received from Krebs with White House Chief of Staff Mark Meadows. On November 17th, Krebs tweeted out a statement issued by the nation's leading election scientists that dismissed claims that election systems had been manipulated as either unsubstantiated or technically incoherent. President Trump fired Krebs the same day. Jeez. President Trump claimed the statement released by Krebs was highly inaccurate and that there were massive improprieties and fraud. The president had no evidence for his claim. Just time and time again. On November 19th, Rudy Giuliani, Sidney Powell, and Jenna Ellis held a press conference at the Republican National Committee headquarters in Washington, D.C. Powell asserted that there was massive influence of communist money through Venezuela, Cuba, and likely China in the interference of our elections here in the States. She pointed a finger at Dominion, claiming its software was created in Venezuela at the direction of Hugo Chavez to make sure he never lost an election. Giuliani echoed her claims. Hope Hicks told the Select Committee how that press conference was received in the White House. The day after the press conference, President Trump spoke by phone with Sidney Powell from the Oval Office. During the call, Powell repeated the same claims of foreign interference in the election she had made at the press conference. While she was speaking, the president muted his speakerphone and laughed at Powell, telling the others in the room, "This does sound crazy, doesn't it?" Oh. Okay. That's going to be it for me. Short stream. Maybe back tomorrow? Probably not. I think we'll pick this up Thursday again. Alrighty. Everyone, have a good night. All of my viewers, all beautiful 0 of you. Have a good night.